Sarah was unsettled by the signs her neighbor John had put up in his yard, voicing support for contentious political beliefs. Feeling that these views were harmful and intolerant, she chose to report him to the authorities. However, the consequences of her actions were far more intense and unexpected than she had ever anticipated. What transpired after Sarah made this decision? And how did it all unfold for both of them? Before we jump into the full story, let us know where you're tuning in from by leaving a comment below. Sarah had called the quiet suburban neighborhood home for many years. Life there was typically calm, marked by familiar routines, chatting with neighbors, walking her dog, and enjoying the peaceful atmosphere of a close-knit community. That was until John moved in next door. At first, Sarah didn't give it much thought. John was an older man who kept to himself, and although his yard wasn't as well maintained as others, it didn't bother her. But then something changed. One afternoon, as Sarah was out for a walk, she noticed a sign on John's front lawn, one that read, MAGA 2024, Make America Great Again. A sense of unease washed over her. She had seen similar signs before, not in her neighborhood, but on the news during heated political arguments and across social media. To Sarah, the sign was a symbol of division, something troubling and discordant with the harmony she felt in her neighborhood. It represented a worldview she couldn't understand, and the idea of it being displayed so openly in her peaceful surroundings unsettled her. Each day, the sign stayed put, visible from Sarah's regular walking route, and with every passing day, her discomfort deepened. She'd see the sign and feel her thoughts race. Memories of heated political debates, growing polarization, and a sense of division that seemed to permeate the nation. Could someone like John, who proudly displayed such a sign, really be a peaceful neighbor? Was he someone she could trust in a community where harmony mattered? She found herself obsessing over the idea. Every morning when she left her house, the sign was there. Every evening when she returned, it was still there. One afternoon, Sarah couldn't take it anymore. She called a local authorities hotline, explaining that John's display was potentially offensive and inappropriate for their peaceful community. Her voice shook as she pressed the phone to her ear, her mind already running through the possible repercussions of what she was doing. But in her mind, it felt like the right thing. She was trying to protect the integrity of her neighborhood, right? Little did she know that this one action would set off a chain of events that would change her life and John's life forever. The days following Sarah's report were quiet. Sarah went about her life thinking little of the consequences of her decision. She didn't hear from anyone about her complaint, and to be honest, she expected it to blow over. The authorities had more pressing matters to deal with, and the neighborhood would surely return to its calm routine. But when she pulled into her driveway one Friday evening, she was stunned to see 2 police cars parked outside John's house. Her stomach dropped as she stepped out of her car. She hadn't expected things to escalate like this. As she stood by her driveway watching, she felt a sense of guilt creeping in. But she couldn't quite place it. John wasn't out on his front porch like he usually was. In fact, there was no sign of him at all. The police officers were speaking in hushed tones with John's landlord, who appeared worried, looking back and forth at the house as if expecting an explosion. It wasn't long before Sarah noticed something else. John's car was gone. She wasn't sure why it made her uneasy, but it did. As she walked into her home, the weight of what had just transpired began to sink in. She had never meant for John to be in trouble. She just wanted the sign gone. But here he was, being scrutinized, possibly even facing legal consequences for something she had felt compelled to report. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept imagining John, the older man who had lived quietly next door for years, being interrogated or worse, being unfairly punished. What if he was just exercising his right to free speech? But Sarah, though conflicted, told herself that she had done the right thing. He was standing for something divisive, and she had to act to protect the peace she valued in her community. The following Monday, Sarah received an unexpected phone call. "Hello, this is Detective Madison. Am I speaking with Sarah?" Her heart raced as she answered. "Yes, this is she. Is everything okay? Could you come down to the precinct to talk to us? We have some questions regarding your report." she agreed without thinking, and within the hour, she found herself sitting in a small, cold room at the local police station, the fluorescent lights buzzing above her head. Detective Madison, a woman in her mid-30s with sharp eyes, sat across from her, her hands folded. "We're investigating the situation with your neighbor, John. I have to tell you, your complaint sparked more than we initially anticipated," the detective said, her voice firm but neutral. Sarah nodded, unsure what she meant. "Is he in trouble?" The detective took a deep breath. "I don't know yet, but we're looking into it. It's not just about the sign, Sarah. Your call has caused ripples beyond what you expected. There are certain sensitivities involved here." Sarah's mind spun. "What do you mean?" Detective Madison leaned forward, her expression serious. "John has connections. He's not the man you think he is." The words hit Sarah like a cold slap to the face. "Connections? What does that mean?" The detective hesitated. "His background, Sarah. His connections with certain groups we've been tracking for some time." Sarah was stunned. She had only reported a yard sign. Her head spun as thoughts rushed through her. What had she done? What if she had just thrown a spark into a fire she didn't understand? "Just give us a little time," the detective continued, "but I need you to stay available for questioning. It's part of the investigation." Before Sarah could respond, the door opened, and an officer handed the detective a file. She glanced through it and then gave Sarah an unreadable look. "It's not just about the sign," she repeated, more softly this time. "You might want to reconsider everything." The door shut behind her as Sarah was left alone, confused and overwhelmed by the gravity of what had just been revealed. The next few days felt like a whirlwind to Sarah. She couldn't shake the conversation with Detective Madison from her mind. The phrase, "connections with certain groups," kept echoing in her ears. She couldn't understand it. John was just an older man, quiet, never causing any trouble. So why did the detective imply he was involved with something larger? Was he really part of a movement she couldn't comprehend? The thought made her stomach turn. She wished she could take it all back. The complaint, the call, the decision to involve the authorities. But the truth was, Sarah had no idea how far-reaching her simple action had become. As the days passed, Sarah found herself constantly scanning the news, waiting for some mention of John. But nothing came up. The silence was unsettling, and she started to wonder if maybe the authorities had been bluffing, trying to scare her into silence. Maybe it hadn't been as serious as they made it sound. Or maybe John was in even deeper trouble than she could have imagined. Then, on the fourth day after her visit to the station, something happened that would change everything. It was a Saturday morning when Sarah heard the knock on her door. She opened it cautiously, her heart racing. Standing on her doorstep was a man she didn't recognize. He looked to be in his early 40s, with short, neatly combed hair and a calm demeanor. He wore a button-down shirt and jeans, though there was something authoritative about him, an air of quiet confidence. "I'm David," he said, introducing himself with a warm handshake. "I'm a friend of John's." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "John? What's going on with him? Is he okay?" David smiled, though there was an unmistakable tension in his eyes. "I'm afraid I'm here to speak to you about what happened, about your complaint." Sarah's throat tightened. "What do you mean? I just called about a sign he had up. I didn't know it would go this far." David's expression softened. "I know you didn't mean harm, but you need to understand, Sarah, that what you've done has affected more people than you realize." She was confused. "What do you mean? I didn't do anything but call to report a sign." David sighed and stepped closer, lowering his voice. "John isn't just any man. He's been a key figure in a number of grassroots projects aimed at bridging divides that go much deeper than politics. But those who want to keep the country divided, they've been keeping an eye on him. What you saw as a sign was actually a signal for something bigger." Sarah shook her head. "This doesn't make any sense. I thought he was just expressing his opinion." David's face was serious now. "It's not just about opinions, Sarah. John has been trying to unite people from different walks of life, trying to help those who feel left behind. But the groups he's trying to reach are often labeled as controversial." Sarah felt the weight of his words sink in. She hadn't realized that a simple sign could carry so much meaning. It wasn't about politics. It was about connection. about trying to bring together people from all walks of life, whether they agreed on everything or not. But why didn't he say anything? Why didn't he explain? She asked, her voice faltering. David shook his head. Because he knew people wouldn't listen. He knew they'd see him as a troublemaker, and he didn't want to be labeled before he could make a difference. But now, because of your report, things are spiraling out of control. Sarah felt sick to her stomach. She had never considered that her actions might have consequences like this. She thought she was doing the right thing, standing up for peace. But now she understood that peace wasn't always as simple as it seemed. Is he going to be okay? She asked, a lump forming in her throat. David's expression softened. I don't know, but we need to fix this, before it's too late. Before Sarah could respond, David handed her a small envelope. This is a letter from John. He asked me to deliver it to you. With trembling hands, Sarah took the envelope, feeling the weight of it more than she should have. She opened it slowly, reading the words inside. Sarah, I know you meant well, but I need you to understand that what you did wasn't just a small matter. You've set a lot of things in motion, and it's going to take time to untangle them. I'm not angry, but I want you to see the bigger picture. Maybe, just maybe, you'll realize that the people you thought were your enemies aren't always what they seem. We're all just people, trying to find common ground. I hope you can forgive yourself, as I forgive you. The words hit Sarah like a ton of bricks. She stood there, the letter in her hands, feeling a sense of shame and confusion. She had been quick to judge, quick to make assumptions about someone she didn't know. And now it felt like everything had fallen apart. Do you think I can fix this? Sarah asked David, her voice barely above a whisper. David paused before answering. It's going to be hard, Sarah. But the fact that you're willing to understand and own up to what happened, that's the first step. Sarah nodded, determined. She couldn't undo the past, but maybe, just maybe, she could help make things right. Sarah stood by her window the next morning, the envelope from John resting on the kitchen table. The sun cast a warm glow across her living room, but her mind was clouded with uncertainty and a newfound sense of responsibility. She knew she had to act, to understand the full extent of what her actions had inadvertently set into motion. Determined to make amends, Sarah reached out to David, arranging a meeting at the local community center. When she arrived, she found David already there, waiting patiently. The room buzzed with the usual weekend activities, children playing, adults engaged in conversations, but there was an undercurrent of tension, a shared awareness of the fragile peace they were trying to maintain. Thank you for meeting with me, Sarah began, her voice steady despite the turmoil she felt inside. David nodded. Of course, John believed in community, and that includes you. He wanted to bridge gaps, not widen them. As they spoke, more neighbors began to gather, curious about the unfolding situation. Sarah could sense their apprehension, mirroring her own fears and misunderstandings. Taking a deep breath, she decided to be transparent. I reported John's sign because I felt it was causing division in our neighborhood. I didn't realize there was so much more to it, she admitted. Meeting the eyes of those around her, David stepped forward, his presence commanding yet approachable. John uses symbols and signals to communicate with different groups, people who often feel marginalized or misunderstood. His work is about finding common ground, about bringing people together despite our differences. A murmur of agreement and realization spread through the room. Sarah continued, encouraged by the supportive responses. I want to apologize, she said earnestly. I let my fears get the better of me and acted without understanding the full picture. I want to help make things right. David smiled, a genuine warmth in his eyes. That's a brave and important step, Sarah. We can't undo the past, but we can work together to build a stronger, more understanding community. Inspired by Sarah's honesty, other neighbors began to share their own experiences and perspectives. Slowly, walls of mistrust and misunderstanding began to crumble. Conversations that were once fraught with tension became opportunities for connection and empathy. In the weeks that followed, Sarah and John collaborated on several community projects aimed at fostering dialogue and cooperation. They organized neighborhood forums, where residents could voice their concerns and aspirations in a safe and respectful environment. John's efforts to bridge divides found new life through the collective will of the community to support one another. One crisp autumn evening, as the community gathered for a potluck in the park, Sarah found herself standing beside John, watching as laughter and conversation flowed freely among neighbors who had once been divided by fear and misunderstanding. "Thank you for giving us a chance," John said quietly, his eyes reflecting gratitude and hope. Sarah smiled, feeling a profound sense of accomplishment. "Thank you for helping us see beyond our differences." As the sun set, casting a golden hue over the neighborhood, Sarah realized that the true strength of a community lies in its ability to come together, to listen, and to grow from each other's stories. What began with a single, misunderstood sign had blossomed into a testament of unity and resilience. Thank you for joining us on Sarah and John's journey towards understanding and unity. Their story reminds us that behind every sign, every action, there is a deeper narrative waiting to be heard. In our diverse communities, it's essential to look beyond the surface, to engage in meaningful conversations, and to seek common ground. We'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. Drop a comment below and share where you're tuning in from. Let's continue to build bridges and foster a community where everyone feels seen, heard, and valued.